Hey guys, it's John back again. Suppose you're wondering why I'm have something that looks like a trash can in front of the camera. Well, that's because this is a Mac Pro, and on this video I'm going to show how to upgrade the processor, the memory, and the solid state drive, because they stopped producing these in 2013. And even though that was 5 years ago, this is 2018, these are still extremely powerful computers. This you can buy from the Apple Store, brand new. They also have refurbished ones. This one was a 6-core processor with 16 gigs of memory. It's a Xeon server processor. The memory is ECC memory, which is error correcting memory. And it had a 512 gig solid state drive. That seems like an extremely powerful machine, and it is. Even today, that machine can, performance-wise, outrun some of the PCs and even some of the i5 and i3 Macs that are out there in MacBooks. So even though this is 2013, it's still very powerful. The issue is when these first came out, they were very expensive. This 6-core machine was probably $5,000. They can be upgraded. You can buy one that goes all the way up to a 12-core machine with 64 gigs of memory and a 1 terabyte solid state drive. At the time in 2013, that would cost you $10,000 to $12,000, which is astronomical in price. But its power is what people would need in environments for video editing, photo editing, stuff that's really intensive with graphics. This machine has two video cards in them. So these would come with dual video cards from a low end to a high end, depending on what the need of the user was. To make a long story short, today you can get this machine with the 6-core processor for probably around $2,000. You can buy this machine with the 12-core and fully upgraded. It's still going to run you $4,000 to $5,000. But you can buy the 6-core now for $2,000. You can buy the 1 terabyte hard drive, the 12-core processor, and the 32 gigs of memory, which would be around where be a good area to start. You don't really need to go to 64 or 128 gigs of memory unless you really need to, for probably another $800. So instead of spending $5,000 for a 12-core machine, you can do the same thing with the process I'm going to show you for about $2,800 to $3,000. It's a whole lot cheaper. So to get started, this thing is extremely powerful, but extremely compact. Everything's just jammed into this small tube. I mean, you can just look at my hand to see how big this thing is. And believe it or not, Apple makes it extremely easy to work with. Okay, so to just give a quick rundown of what this thing has. See if we can zoom in on the... No, we can't, but I'll see if I can bring the camera a little closer. So it has a headphone jack, a microphone jack, 4 USB ports, 6 Thunderbolt ports, 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, an HDMI out. That's your power connector, and then your power switch. Makes this great is it's very easy to open up. You just push this little switch over and then you lift the top off. You have your fan on top, memory. Here's your one of your video cards. Here's another video card, and your solid state drive, and then more memory. So, to start this off, you just push this little button, and that pops the memory out, and then you can grab your memory and pull it out. One disclaimer: make sure that you discharge any static electricity, touch the metal case, or touch something that's metal to ground yourself. Make sure you're not standing on a carpet. If you're in a very low humidity, I would wear a ESD strap, anti-static electricity grounding strap, so you don't have to worry about destroying anything from any static electricity. Also, if you're not comfortable doing this, I would let a professional do it. This computer is new. I got it maybe 6 months ago, and it has a 1-year warranty, and that warranty is going to be voided today. I know exactly what I'm doing. I don't have a problem doing this. I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to blow anything up. So if I was to have any problems, though, Apple wouldn't touch it. And I'll show you, because I've already done some work on it, but I'll show you where that will tell them instantly that it was messed with. One is because the memory that I have is not Apple memory. And two, the solid state drive is not directly from Apple. So they'll know that right away. But upgrading anything doesn't void your warranty. It's when you have to do certain things, like when you replace the processor, you have to actually stab your torque screwdriver through some plastic covers, and that voids the warranty. And anything that gets damaged or fails to operate because of what you did, that would void the warranty. So if I replaced this memory and upgraded this memory without going through Apple, and then something happened to the memory bus, they could potentially blame the memory upgrade as the failure because they didn't do it. So you replace that, then you come over here, you push the button, and you open up this one, slide this memory out, and this memory out. Put your new memory in, push the tab in, and you're done with memory. Solid state drive, right here. This is a pretty simple upgrade process also. Be nice if you're going to do any kind of work on something like this, so you get yourself a nice little toolkit. This is a nice little toolkit. It has all the little torque screws that you need. This, I think, uses a might be a T8 or T10. T10. So it's a T10 Torx. Remove the screw, and then take your solid state drive, wiggle it back and forth, straight in an upward motion, and it comes out. Put your new solid state drive in, and you're done. So once that's all done, those are the easy parts. The hard part is the processor and getting to it. So the first thing you have is you have these, I think these are a T10. Yeah, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 T10s that go around the top, and then you have the same around the bottom. But what you want to do is you want to take the ones around the top first. Make sure you keep all your screws organized so you know what's where, what goes where, so that you don't have to worry about losing anything. As anybody who does any kind of tinkering DIY knows, there's nothing worse than putting something back together and having screws left over. Most people like me, we don't worry about it. We just set the extra screws aside. We might need them for another project. And if it works, who cares? But something like this, you need to make sure you keep track of every screw. So once you do that, you lift this up. This is the fan assembly. And you can see based on where the power supply is, that's the power supply here. You want to turn it to the opposite direction, and you'll have this cable here. And then, see if I can lift up a little bit. Right up inside there, you have that connector that holds it. So you have to use 2 screws on that connector. And I think they are, I think they're T8s. We'll get it to make sure. That's a T8. Let's make sure this is. Yes, these are T8s, and they are captive screws, so you don't have to worry about them falling out. And then the cover will come off. Okay, come on. There it goes. Here's the cover. And it has, like I said, the screws are captive, so they don't fall out. Set that aside. So you can use a pair of tweezers or a little pry tool or something. Get up in here. You take the tool under the, right there. You have this little connector here, and then you have an antenna connector, and you can see the connector here that went to, and then there's the antenna connector right on top. So there's your connector right here, and right on top, that's where your antenna goes. So the next thing we need to do is we need to take off this heat vent here, because what we just took off is a fan. So it has a huge fan inside there. And that pulls the heat from this power supply and CPU assembly out. Pulls all that heat out. So then we have 2 screws. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a screw right inside there. It's a very small, I think it is a T7 or 6. Yeah, I think it's a T6. There it is. And you get right inside there. And you got to be careful with this one because it's a very small screw. There we go. Luckily it's stuck to the... And here's the other one. That's all there is to that. And then you lift this vent off the top. Now, before you do any more, we have to take off the bottom screws that go around the bottom. So let me take them off real quick. Those are the T10s. Because your only way you're going to be able to get the power supply out is that you have to take this bottom off. You actually use the base. It's kind of a little holding thing for you. So this should slide right up and off. Now you turn it over, being careful. You can set it right down on it. Doesn't need to, let's see, where are you? There we go. Doesn't need to be perfect, but you need to at least get it so that, there we go. The holes should still line up from the top and the bottom. They're in the same spot. So then you have to remove this card on the top. Again, these are T10s. 2 screws. One here. And one here. Now this card has 2 connectors here and here. These connectors attach to the video cards, so you can pry these up. They're on these pins, wiggle them back and forth. Then this one, wiggle it back and forth like that. Then the card is actually attached to the card to the power supply in the middle, so you want to wiggle it a little bit and then lift it straight up. And then you have a second card, a third cable here, and then you wiggle that back and forth and pop it off of there. That takes that card off. So now we have everything disconnected down here, and our power supply should come off. So we have to flip it back around and try to keep it lined up where it was. Get it off the base. Flip it right over. Keeping it lined up the same way. Back to where it was. So now we have 6 screws that are right on top. Show you right here. These 2, and then these 2 over here. So we have to take those off. Those are, I don't think they're T10s. Yeah, they're T10. No, they're T9s, I think. Maybe they're T8s. Let me see. No, they're T9s. There you go, T9. Perfect fit. So this isn't as difficult as it may seem. I mean, it might look complicated, but it's not that hard. You gotta be careful when you're taking these last screws off, because things will start to move around because you're now getting all this disconnected. Okay, so we got this off. So now we should be able to turn it like this, And the power supply should come right out like that. So the power supply we don't need to deal with. We can set it aside. Here we go. And this card here is where your CPU is. And this is its heatsink. So you have to remember that CPUs are pressed to the heat sinks and they have a thermal compound on them and they can be kind of sticky. But this is being held on by these 4 bolts. The CPU is being held on by these 4 bolts. So what we need to do is we need to take these off first. These are a T10. And you should do like 4 screws and then come to another corner. Turn 1, 2, 3, 4, then come to another corner. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because this is this bracket is all under tension. So you don't want to just take off one because it can it could actually damage the CPU by putting pressure just on one area. So I usually do 4 turns at a time. There it goes. Goes 1 screw. You see how it just popped away from the CPU or from the heatsink by that 1 screw when the tension gets relieved. There we go. So, we've got these 4 outside screws done. This should now pull away. You gotta watch out for these brackets that hold the power supply. Pull it away. And now, this heatsink assembly can be set aside. Tell you what, let me get this out the way. Move this over here. So now we have, bring this down some. This is basically, you have to really be careful of any of the thermal compound. Making sure you clean it up. So this bracket that holds the CPU in place is held on by these screws back here. And these screws back here are usually covered in a black tape like this. You can pull this tape off. See if I can get it off. I'm not worried about it since, and you can see where that's the end of the screw. But all this does is just cover up the end of the screw. If you buy it brand new, the bracket itself will have the same tape on the other side. So you remove these screws exactly like you removed the other 4. You do them in steps, each one at a time, relieving pressure in a kind of like in a circle or X pattern. You don't want to have a screw completely taken off on one end to where it starts to twist the CPU. These CPUs don't have pins on them. The pins are on the board. They're actually little. They're like little metal pins with a ball on the end of them. Those balls. Those little balls can get damaged and they can actually break off. They're just like little solder balls. And if they break off, then the end of the pin is just a sharp piece of metal, and it could damage the CPU. It still may work, but it can cause some severe damage. So we want to make sure you take the screws off in an X pattern, and until you get it off completely, then you can remove the bracket and pull the CPU off. Now I've already replaced this CPU, so I had a 6-core. Now this is a 12-core, and if I remember correctly, they're also hyper-threaded for 24 cores. So I'm gonna go get a paper towel. We gotta clean all this thermal compound off, and put some new compound on before we put everything back together. All right, so we got everything cleaned off. As you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's still a little bit compound down around the edges, but that's not a big deal. If you're gonna replace the CPU, you're gonna take everything off and clean it completely. Make sure you don't get any thermal compound on the pads on the other side of the CPU or on the pins. You want to make sure you keep everything clean, and definitely don't get no compound on anything else on the motherboard. We cleaned off the heatsink. That's all nice and clean. Got a nice gold pad. Now, I just go on eBay or just go on Amazon and I just buy these little tubes of thermal paste. They're almost like a one-use little syringe. You get, I think I get maybe 2 or 3, because a lot of people don't realize that you really don't need a lot of thermal compound on a CPU. All you want is something that's going to help transfer heat away from the CPU onto the heatsink, and then the fan can carry it away. So that's what this is for. Now, there's a couple ways people apply thermal paste or thermal compound. Me, most of the time, I just put a nice dab. You gotta be careful because these things, they'll just run crazy when you push. I put a nice dab in the middle, and then I take myself any flat surface. I don't care if it's a piece of cardboard, it could be a credit card or anything, and you just spread it out. Might need a little more. I didn't put too much on here. Whoops, put a little more on here. So you don't have to lather it on really thick. It just needs to be to where it can transfer that heat from the CPU. Now you also got to remember, once you put this onto the heatsink and you start tightening these screws out, it's going to start spreading that thermal paste. Once the CPU heats up for the first time, that thermal paste starts to get a little viscosity, and it'll spread out even more. So you don't need to put too much on. You just need to make sure you get good coverage. And you can, if you're not sure and you're concerned, you can always put an app on your computer, and that'll monitor the temperature of the CPU and watch to make sure it doesn't get too hot. 70 Celsius and above is too hot for a CPU, and most of them will start to air out and show problems when your CPU gets too hot. So we're going to take this back, bring this back over. We're going to line this back up. Pick up these little pins here. We're going to line up our holes. a 6. Just do a couple turns just to get the screw started. Go down to the other corner. I think it was a, no, it's T10. There it is. Look at that. Just a few turns, get the screw started. Then we'll start doing it in a X pattern and tightening it up. And it's here. Okay, so we're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we do this one. When you do replace your CPU, make sure that it is seated properly in on the pad before you put the bracket on. Some symptoms would be really weird performance, because I mean there have been, you can put a CPU on and the computer will boot up, but it will act a little strange, extremely slow. I mean, this is from experience. I've seen CPUs get installed and still work, but not work right. Okay, so we line up our power supply. That looks good. Then we need to put these screws back on. These are T10s. Correction, these are T9s. Where's my T9? There it is. Try not to tighten them all the way up until you get them all in, because they'll have a tendency to twist these little brackets. At least until you have the 2 for each bracket installed. Two of the brackets have 4 screws, or 4 of the brackets. No, 2 of the brackets have 4 screws, 1 on each side, and 2 of the brackets only have 1 screw on one side. So now that we got this back on, we need to flip it back over. Right where it was. Ooh, easy. Well, we're not lined up right. Where's this at? There it goes. Okay, now we have this. This is just an interface board. I think it has a, might have a BIOS or something like that on it. It has some kind of chip on it, which I can't read. Looks like it's an Intel chip. So it might have maybe like a North Bridge or a South Bridge. So I'm not sure how the Mac, I know PCs have a North Bridge and a South Bridge, but on a Mac I'm not really sure. But this looks like some kind of maybe the bus processor or something like that. But this bracket goes back on here. You line up the 2 pins and then press it in place. Make sure it's firmly in place. Then line up this connector with this card. Here, let me, whoops, sorry about that. So we have this connector. I kind of missed that. So I can cut this part out. So we're going to put this card back on and just take this connector, line it up with the 2 pins, and then push it firmly in place. Make sure it's firmly in place. Be careful. Rest the card in your palm. Don't hold it like this and push. You could take a chance of cracking the card. So rest the back of it in your palm when you push that connector in. Then we're going to line up this connector with this card here, which goes right on top. Before you push it down, make sure these 2 connectors are out. Wiggle it a little bit, push it down in place. There it goes. This cable back here, make sure it's tucked inside behind the power supply. Turn it back around. You have 2 screws with this, that's not a T8. I think it's a T10. Yes, T10. Screw that back in. Get this guy. Screw that back in. Then again, these connectors, these are your interface connectors from your video cards. You want to push them, make sure the holes are lined up, hold the whole thing together, and then push that card in. We got another one here. Line those 2 up, push it in. Now we got to flip it back over. Just make sure, hold everything. Flip it over. Everything should still be lined up. Very nice. Okay. Now we want to put this cover back on. Lines up. Pretty simple. It's wedge shaped. Lines right up with the board. You have 2 very small, I think they were, what did I say, there were T8s. No, T6. They're just such, you just got to be really careful getting these in so that the screw doesn't fall. And tighten that bad boy in. Flip it over. Got another one. Get that screw in. Gently and slowly. Put that in. Tighten it up. Now, everything is upright to where it should be. We take our screws around the bottom with our T10. Make sure we're lined up, which we're not. So let's see. I think this is the power supply. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little cutout in the bottom bracket. It's the only section that's cut out, and it goes with this on the power supply. So you slide your power supply down in there, and it fits perfect. Put these 5 screws back in. And one more. Usually I'd fast forward through all the screwing, but that was nasty. But there's only 5 screws, so that's not that big of a deal. So now we need to put our fan back on. And again, we have this connector, and we have our Wi-Fi Bluetooth antenna right there. So when we take this up, I don't know if you can see, but we make sure we get our antenna connected. It's just a push down connector. You don't have a lot of room, obviously. There it goes. Then you have this connector, which goes down. It's pretty much lines up like most. I don't know if you ever tore apart an iPhone or an iPad. These are they don't have any pins. It's like a rigid block that has the pins built into it, and it just pushes into the block. Then we have our cover. Now the cover is kind of tricky, so you want to lay it like that. And I think we were T9s or T8s. So we want to lift up on it, get it in the screw, just get it started, and then get the other one started. So we have it in like that. And then go ahead and tighten them up, tighten them both up. Now, make sure our cable for our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna doesn't get in the way. We lower it back down, line everything up. And we put our 5 screws in the top. Okay. So next we want to, here it is. Now we want to put in our solid state drive. So if we upgraded, like I had a 512 in here before, I'm going to upgrade to a 1 terabyte. I already have, but I'll still go through the process and tell you how to get everything restored. You want to make sure, of course, that before you do any of this work, especially if you're messing with the hard drive or processor, that you want to do a full backup before you even shut the machine down. So you have a connector down here at the bottom. They line up with this solid state drive. This is a 1 terabyte solid state drive. I think it's made by Samsung. It's offered by a company called OWC. They're pretty good with reliable upgrade parts for your Mac, MacBooks, iMacs. I mean, I bought a lot of stuff from them. Some of their prices can be high. You can look at some things that they use to upgrade some of the Mac products and get them elsewhere cheaper. But everything I ever bought from them have fit exactly. They have how-to videos on how to do anything that you need to do for your Mac that you buy from them, how to install it. All the how-to videos are on their site. But I've never had a problem with anything I've ever bought from them. So I won't say anything bad about them. Some of the stuff you can get cheaper, but if you want something that's reliable and a guaranteed product that's going to work, then sometimes it's worth the price. The solid state drive, I was a little concerned on what kind of drive to get that fit the right form factor, that was going to work for the Mac Pro. And since I was very confident in the reliability of their products, I bought the solid state drive from them. And it actually wasn't that bad. I think it was like $300, a little over 300. So for a 1 terabyte solid state drive, that's not a bad price. Not too bad. So you line up the pins on the connector, kind of wiggle it a little bit, get it to go all the way down in, and then your screw should line up right here. Take your screw, which I think was a T9, line that up, and tighten it up. Last, our memory. Again, you can buy the memory from anybody. You can buy it from OWC. I didn't. I bought this memory off of eBay. I think this is HP memory, Hynix. It's 8 gig DDR3, 14900 memory. And it's ECC memory. You can't use regular memory in this. It has to be ECC, error correcting server memory. So if you can see inside, I don't know if you can, there's an opening, just like the memory has an opening. And you have to make sure you line that up. Usually I think the opening, the short end is at the bottom. So there's a slot. You line up the slot on both sides, slide the memory in, and then evenly on front and top, push it until it snaps into place. Same thing on the next one, which is here. Line it up, push it until it snaps into place. Then you take this and you push it until it locks. Same thing on this one, but it's in reverse because this card on this side, the memory slots on this side are actually flipped. So now you have the slot on the short side on top. Slide it in, line it up, not lined up. Slide it in there, slide it in there. Get it all the way in and slide it in. Same thing here. Get it all the way in and slide it in. Push it till it locks. Take your cover, slide it down till you see this lines up with this slot, just like that, all the way down, and lock it. Like I was saying early in the beginning, that this looks like a trash can. That's what people called it when it came out. Everybody was kind of very excited. It's a very reliable and very powerful product. It was way ahead of its time. I mean, who could imagine having a server this small sitting on your desktop that had 24 cores on it, up to 128 gigs of memory? You know, usually those were sitting in a rack. They were 4, 6, 8 U's in thickness, 19 inches wide, sitting in a rack, and you had a stack of them. And this just sits on your desk and supports, I think, 4 or 6 monitors, I think. Or you could have a single monitor like the monitor that I have that supports 4 displays. So I could actually take that one monitor and it has 4 video inputs and run it into here and have 4 different video displays running at one time. I have no complaints about it. I'll go ahead when you, if you just replace the solid state drive and you're going to a new one, and it's or you're going to a larger drive and it's a brand new one, you don't really need to do anything with a Mac. You plug it in, and then the Mac will come up and tell you if you want to load the operating system from the internet. You tell it yes, you put in your network information, or unless you have if you have an RJ45, a hardwire connected, then it'll go ahead and find the latest operating system and pull it down. Once it's down and installed, then you can go ahead using Time Machine, pull your backup, and you're back up and done. There's not really a whole lot to it. If it's wireless, then of course you got to connect to your Wi-Fi network. It will then go out to the internet, pull the latest version of the latest Mac version down, like Mac OS, install it. It's about as easy as it gets when it comes to restoring a Mac. Anytime you lose a hard drive on a Mac, you don't have to reinstall an operating system from disk or anything. It'll go straight to Apple and pull the latest version down. I don't have any complaints about it. I'm now running 12 cores, 32 gigs of memory, and 1 terabyte drive. This thing is nice and quiet. It doesn't even get hot. And I'm doing some of these videos and video editing with it, and I haven't even come close to taxing the processors in this thing. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe. I think there's a button right down in here somewhere. You can hit that button and subscribe. Like if you like it. If you have any critiques or you have any ideas, you have any problems with this video, just let me know. I don't have any problems with any critiques except for trollers. You can just troll if you want, but you're not getting anywhere. But let me know, subscribe, and have a good day. Just wanted to show you, that's where I keep my Mac Pro, and she's all booted up, she's all working. Yeah, I know, I got a cable mess back there, but I'm still working on some other projects. But to show you, here's my Mac. So you can see, late 2013, 2.7 gigahertz, 12 core Xeon E5, 32 gigs of 1.8 gig memory, and there's 2 AMD D700 video cards with 6 gigs each. So you can't really beat that for the price today.